Chapter 3, Marketing, Prospecting, and Sales Presentations. You'll notice here that there are 18 questions on the test coming from the material in Chapter 3. Chapter 3, we're going to talk about FINRA conduct rules. Now, conduct rules, this is FINRA rules and regulations that tell broker-dealers how to treat the public. We start with communications with the public. There are several different types of communications. There is advertising, sales literature, correspondence, institutional sales material, public appearance, and independently prepared reprints. FINRA conduct rules and uniform practice code. We continue with the conduct rules, how we treat our customers. Now, the Uniform Practice Code deals with how broker-dealers who are members of FINRA treat one another. This includes FINRA Rule 5130, sales of new issues by restricted persons, recommendations to customers, disclosure of financial condition, selling concessions, rewarding employees of others. This is gift rules and continuing commissions. We're also going to look at private security transactions, opening an account with a broker-dealer, sharing in a customer account, borrowing from or lending to a customer, customer mail hold, and trade confirmations. These are all included in conduct and uniform practice codes. Let's start with FINRA Rule 5130. 5130 prohibits restricted persons from buying IPO new issues. This rule does not apply to a subsequent new issue. Now, what's the difference between an IPO and a subsequent new issue? Here's the difference. The very first time that a company sells its shares, new shares, to the public, very first time, that's an IPO. That's an IPO. Now, when a company sells shares to the public for the very first time, might they sell new shares to the public at a later date, maybe a few months later or a few years later? Absolutely. And that's a subsequent new issue. That's a subsequent new issue. This rule applies to the IPO, the initial public offering, not to subsequent new issues. And the rule is pretty simple. The rule says that restricted persons cannot buy IPO new issues. That's what the rule says. Again, real simple. The question is, who is a restricted person? Restricted persons would include broker-dealers, would include broker-dealer personnel. That would be officers, directors, and employees of the broker-dealer. Restricted persons also include registered representatives, also includes immediate family of restricted persons. And this is where we get a bit of a challenge thrown at us. Who is an immediate family of a restricted person? Well, restricted person, the employee of the broker-dealer, the registered rep of the broker-dealer. Who would the immediate family members of these people be? Spouse, children, parents, siblings, brothers and sisters, in-laws. Now, this includes all in-laws: mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, all in-laws, all in-laws. Also considered to be a restricted person, immediate family, would be a person who's receiving material support from the restricted person. I'm a registered representative. I'm a registered representative. Someone lives with me. Maybe it's a live-in boyfriend or girlfriend, and I provide material support for them. I pay the rent. I pay the mortgage. I buy the food. This person is not technically related to me because I'm not married to them. They're a live-in, but they are considered to be a restricted person under Rule 5130. 5130. Now, let's be careful. Who is not a restricted person? You'll notice here that grandparents are not restricted persons. Grandparents are not restricted persons. I mean, my grandma, I love her. I talk to her almost every day. She's not restricted. My mother-in-law, I can't stand her. I see her once a year. She's restricted. Really weird, very unusual, very odd, but that's what the rule says. Who else is not restricted? Nephews, cousins, aunts, and uncles. These are not restricted persons. Rewarding employees of others. We're going to talk about gifts here. The maximum gift that a registered rep can give to someone who is a customer is $100 per person per year. The maximum gift that a registered rep could receive from a customer is $100 per person per year. Per person per year. Now, this excludes normal business expenses, an occasional meal, occasional sporting event, cost of a business meeting, conference, seminar, giveaways, marketing items like golf balls or pins that have a broker-dealer's logo on them. Okay? Now, there is a question in FINRA's database that deals with this $100 gift limit. And the question has to do with season tickets to either a sporting event or a social event. If you buy season tickets and give those season tickets to one person, again, could be a sporting event or a social event, one person, that's not a normal business expense. That would be considered a gift, and the $100 gift limit applies. $100 gift limit applies. Now, the gift limit applies to all your customers, including family members, with one exception. Your spouse is your customer. The gift limit does not apply to gifts between spouses. Private securities transactions, known as selling away. You may see selling away on the test. Selling away is simply when a registered rep is selling securities that the broker-dealer does not offer. Selling securities the broker-dealer does not offer. Before the registered rep could engage in the private securities transaction, they would have to give written notification to their firm. Now on the test, folks, they might say written notification to the firm or to the broker-dealer or to the principal. It's all the same thing. Written notification is required before engaging in the private securities transaction. They must also receive approval from the firm if they're going to be paid on this private securities transaction. Broker-dealer would have to run the trades through their books and records as though the broker-dealer were actually offering these securities to the public. Now, what might a private securities transaction be? Let's say that I'm a registered representative. I've got a friend from college. My friend wants to open up a restaurant, and they're going to sell stock in the ownership of that restaurant to raise the capital. They know I work in the securities industry. They asked me to assist them in selling those stocks to potential investors to help them raise the capital to open up their restaurant. That would be a private securities transaction. Before I engage in that transaction, I've got to give my firm written notification. And if my friend says, if you help me, I'll pay you, I've got to get my firm's approval. Open an account with other broker-dealer. I work for a broker-dealer. Let's say I work for broker-dealer ABC. And I'm going to go to another broker-dealer to open an account. Let's say that broker-dealer is XYZ. Must notify employing firm and executing firm before opening the account. So the registered rep would have to notify their firm, ABC, and the firm who is opening the account, the executing firm, XYZ, that they're opening an account with a broker-dealer, different broker-dealer. The executing firm would notify the employing firm and the associated person, the registered rep, before the first trade. The executing firm would send duplicate trade confirmations to the employing firm upon request, but only upon request. This does not apply, this rule does not apply if the registered rep is opening an account with an investment company or opening an account to purchase a variable contract. variable contract. Now, the reason this rule exists is pretty simple. As a registered representative, we have to follow rules and regulations of the securities industry. If we don't, we're in trouble. Our firm is also in trouble. Our firm is also in trouble. So since our firm has liability, if we go and start doing things in an account at another broker-dealer that would be illegal, such as insider trading or buying IPO new issues, then the employing firm wants to know what's happening. So that's the reason this rule exists. Now, the reason the rule does not apply to investment companies or variable contracts is because there's no way for the registered rep to engage in any type of transactions with investment companies or variable contracts that would violate FINRA rules and regulations. So since the broker-dealer, the employing broker-dealer, has no liability, they have no right to know what's happening. Have no right to know what's happening. Now, be careful here. Be careful here. Could your firm require that they approve of the account being opened before it's opened? Absolutely. Your firm could require that. And in fact, most firms do. Most firms do. But that's not a FINRA requirement. That is a requirement of a broker-dealer. And remember, broker-dealers can always make rules and regulations more severe than FINRA rules and regulations. Okay? Those would be house rules. But for this test, we're talking about FINRA rules only. FINRA rules only. Notification is required, not approval. Outside business activity. I'm a registered rep. I want to take a job nights and weekends working at a candle shop near my home. I've discovered the benefits of aromatherapy, and I want to share those benefits with all who will listen. Before I engage in that outside activity, I must give my firm written notification. And again, remember on the test, could be firm, could be broker-dealer, could be principal who this written notification is provided to. Now, the firm, according to FINRA, does not have the right to approve of this outside business activity. Now, that again is FINRA's rules. Can a broker-dealer have different rules? Yes. So a broker-dealer may say, before you engage in this outside activity, you've got to notify us, which is FINRA's requirement, and we've got to approve, which would be the broker-dealer's requirement, house rules. Sharing in customer accounts. I'm a registered rep. I have a friend. We have known each other for years. We grew up together. My friend is my customer. Can I share in my customer's account? Absolutely. Absolutely. A registered rep can share in an account with a customer. It must be a joint account. The principal and customer must approve of the sharing, and sharing would be proportional to financial contributions. What does that mean? Here's what that means. Let's say that I have a customer, my childhood friend. We open a joint account together. My customer approves of the sharing. My principal approves of the sharing. I put 40% of the money in the account. My friend puts 60% of the money in the account. How much of the profit or loss could I take out? Proportional to my financial contribution, 40%. How much could my friend take out? Profit or loss, 60%, according to their financial contribution. Now you'll notice here that there is an exemption from this proportional sharing when sharing with a family member. I'm a registered rep. My dad is my customer. I open a joint account with my dad. We're going to share the account. The principal approves of the sharing. My customer, who's my dad, approves of the sharing. I put 40% of the money in the account. My dad put 60% of the money in the account. How much of the profit or loss could I take out? All of it. There is no proportional sharing rule when sharing with a family member. All of it. Next, we're going to look at borrowing from or lending to customers. Now, borrowing from or lending to customers is not allowed, unless the customer is in the business of loaning money, such as a bank or a mortgage company, or the customer is an immediate relative. Now, immediate relatives would include spouse, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, siblings, in-laws, all in-laws, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. Now, look at what we have here. Grandchildren, grandparents, aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews. While these folks will be considered immediate relatives when it comes to borrowing or lending, they are not considered immediate relatives under Rule 5130. So be careful, easy to trip you up here. Would grandparents be considered immediate relatives under 5130? No. Would they be considered immediate relatives for borrowing and lending? Yes. Aunts and uncles, 5130? No. For borrowing and lending? Yes. Nieces and nephews for 5130? No. For borrowing? Yes. So just something to be mindful of. Be careful with that. Holding customer mail. Now, folks, there's some questions that seem to appear on every exam, and there's a question about this that appears on every exam. I've never heard people who've taken this test tell me that they did not see this question. Everyone I've talked to over the years who've taken the Series 6 exam have told me this question was on their test. If a customer is going to be traveling domestically, the customer can request, in writing, for the firm to hold the customer's mail. This would be mail that the firm were going to be sending to the customer. And if they're traveling domestically, again, that can be held for 2 months. If they're traveling internationally, then the firm's mail that will be going to the customer can be held for 3 months. Now, the question that you're asking, what happens after 2 months? What happens after 3 months? I don't know, and I don't care, because it's not on the test. One of the things we have to do is we have to stay focused on the test. What do we need to know in order to pass the test? And don't go wandering outside of the test world. In fact, let's take a look at a test tip. Test tip: don't jump to conclusions. Read all answers. You're going to find situations on this exam where you have more than one correct answer for a question. One answer is more correct than the other. So you might have 2 answers that are correct for a question, but one of those 2 answers is more correct than the other. I know that's not fair. I know that's kind of odd. I know that's challenging, but that's the way it is. If you look at your question, look at your answers, you see A, you say that's right, you pick it. You don't bother looking at B, C, or D. Well, A was right, but D was more right. And since you didn't look at B, C, and D, you missed the question. Not because you didn't know the material, but because you were not careful looking at the questions and answers. Got to be careful. Got to be careful. A few more test tips here. You want to eliminate possible answers right away. Now, you're going to find on this test that in most cases you can eliminate 2 answers right away. 2 answers right away. And that's great, because if you can eliminate 2 of the 4 answers right away, you've got 2 answers that are left. If you've got a guess, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting that right. So be sure you eliminate answers that you know are incorrect. Most people hate Roman numeral questions. I got to tell you, I don't hate Roman numeral questions. I kind of like them. Now, we're talking about eliminating possible answers. You can use Roman numeral questions to your advantage to eliminate possible answers. Let's say that I'm looking at a Roman numeral question, and I look at my Roman numerals, 1, 2, 3, and Roman numeral 4. I know that Roman numeral 1 is wrong. Therefore, every answer that has Roman numeral 1 in it is wrong. So I look at my possible answers, A, B, C, and D. I see that Roman numeral 1 is in A, it's in B, it's also in C. But Roman numeral 1 is not in D. Since I know Roman numeral 1 is wrong, I know A, B, and C are wrong. Therefore, I know that the correct answer is D. And I don't even know what Roman numerals are in D. So you can actually use Roman numeral questions to your advantage. Now, another thing we want to talk about as it relates to test tips and answers to questions. If you have to guess at an answer, and folks, I'm going to tell you, you are going to have to. There are going to be some questions where you're just going to have to take a guess at the answer. If you have to guess at an answer, and one of the answers is longer than the other answers, that's the correct answer. That's the one you want to pick. Now, is that true in every case? No, it's not. It's not. I mean, if you know the correct answer and it's not the longest, obviously you pick it. But if you've got a guess and one answer is longer than all the others, pick the longest answer.